And then there's all the other general symptoms that you want to consider when you're taking the case. So general symptoms meaning not necessarily specifically related to the disease, but things like what's your body temperature like? What kind of foods do you crave? What do you dream about? These kinds of things. Okay, so that's getting the information from the case. So that's what takes a lot of time and experience to do a good job of getting that information. And the more you learn the materia medica and the remedies, they start to teach you what questions to ask. So if you can do a good job of taking a basic amount of information, but then once you have an idea of what remedy it might be, then you might need to start going and asking more specific questions to try to rule in or out a particular remedy. So if you know that one remedy is very strongly related to having a thirst for a large quantity of cold water, well, you ask that specifically. I mean, had you done your job in the first place, you should have gotten to it, but if you know more, the more you know about these specific remedies, the easier it is to go and ask those specific questions. Any questions on the case-taking part of it? Okay. So I just covered a big topic in a short amount of time, but the books help you kind of ask those questions and hone those skills further.
I think I have a question or statement, but I think when I'm
Can you speak up really loud?
when I'm going in and getting evaluated for my symptoms, when you ask me questions like, well, what were the contributing causes, or when did it start? It's hard when you have the sniffles to know, or if I have a cold coming on, I have trouble for myself trying to figure out, well, what caused it. What was was I sleeping on my left side last night? Did I get hot in the middle of the night? And I don't know how to train my brain to know to think of those things. And I guess that's just maybe a habit that you have to get into. But
well, my response to that is that not every disease or condition is going to have an apparent contributing cause. Most of the time there is, but it may not be apparent. And if it's not, and that goes with any of these things, is in terms of modalities. Most of the time there will be factors that make your symptom better and make it worse. But there are times when it's not apparent. Like, I don't know what makes it worse. I don't know what makes it better. And in some cases, there won't be anything that makes it better or worse, which just means it's not going to be, we don't have that information, and we'll have to get other information to figure this out. The other way of looking at that is that hopefully if you go through all of this, you'll get enough symptoms that you can make a good prescription that you feel confident in. So you don't need to have, of the 50 things I just mentioned, you don't need to have all 50 in order to prescribe a remedy. And the other thing is, we're going to talk about in a minute with case analysis, you're going to also assess not just all of these facts. You may have gotten in taking a good case, you may have 1,000 facts, but and they're all important, but there's going to be some that are way more important than others, and the ones that are more important are the ones that you will remember. So if it's a really strong modality, like if your cough is definitely 100% worse when you're moving and it goes away completely when you're at rest, you're going to know that. But if it's not that much difference when you're moving versus when you're at rest, you're not going to be sure. And then so the good homeopath will know that's not really a modality we're going to give a lot of weight to, because there's not that much difference. So a lot of times I'll ask, is what makes it significantly better, what makes it significantly worse, and what doesn't really have much effect one way or the other. Okay? So the stronger the symptom, the less you have to train your brain, because it'll just be apparent. Okay, so the second part of step 2 of practicing homeopathy is case analysis. You've taken the case, now you have to analyze what symptoms were more important and what ones were less important. And this is probably the hardest job that the homeopath has. And it's always frustrating when someone with more experience tells you that you learn this from experience. Because until you have that experience, how do you learn it? But you can learn it. There are things that I just mentioned. So first of all, you want to consider which of these symptoms are characteristic and which are not. And it's a matter of degree. And there are lots of ways of deciding or grading these things. You can give, if you want, you can give it a score of like a 1 or 2 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4 of characteristic. And that's a good teaching. I don't do this anymore, but it's a good way to learn. It's what I did originally. So you can grade severity or intensity of symptoms on a 1 to 4 scale. So if someone tells you that, for example, they're craving large quantities of cold water. Well, if they want it with, it has to have ice, and they're drinking an entire quart at a time, and they're doing that every hour, that's really intense, severe, significant symptom. You could give that maybe a 4, okay? But if someone says, well, it doesn't really matter if it's from the cold tap or from the fridge, and I'm drinking like a couple big 3 or 4 gulpfuls of it, twice a day, yeah, they're wanting some large quantities of cold water, but it's not really real strong of a symptom. Or if, the cough goes away, it's a violent cough, and it goes away completely. They have no cough whatsoever if they're sitting completely still. And the minute they get up and make one little move, the cough comes on with full force. That's a 4. That's a really strong, significant symptom. So the severity and intensity of the symptom will give it more weight. The more intense it is, the more characteristic it is. The other thing would be how unique is it versus how common is it. So when someone has a common cold and they have sniffles, and their nose is runny, do you want to put that into your list of symptoms that you're strongly considering of what remedy you're going to prescribe because, their nose is runny? It's a common symptom given that they have a cold. So symptoms that are common given the conditions that you're treating patients for are not really characteristic. And that's where the more experience you have in education you have in medicine, the better you're able to distinguish what's common and what's not common. So, for example, if you're treating a woman who's pregnant in her 3rd trimester and she's telling you, yeah, and I have frequent urination and I have, that's a common symptom. You wouldn't really necessarily prescribe a remedy for that. It kind of goes along with the quote-unquote condition.